I'm really excited, and I have the pleasure of having Prem on the show. He is CEO like myself, has quite an impressive background, which we'll get into. But I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself and mainly be talking about his company Humanly today and how he got to where he is today. But Prem, go ahead.
Hey, thanks so much, Joe. Excited to be here. Yeah, Prem Kumar, CEO, co-founder of Humanly.io. So we help high volume hiring teams screen and remotely interview their job candidates more efficiently and more equitably. Yeah, my background's primarily been in technology. I spent about 10 years at Microsoft working on a lot of our HR tech solutions, as well as products like Dynamics, working on products like how we bring LinkedIn's data into the Microsoft ecosystem when we acquired them. And I then entered the startup world after having my first kid. It was kind of a kick in the butt to follow my passion, and one of those passions was working within the startup ecosystem. So started that in 2016, and then we started the Humanly journey in 2019. But really great to be here.
Yeah, you brought up something about the startup world and, your passion or, wanting to get into it. I always think it takes a unique person to be in the startup world. If you want to kind of elaborate on why you wanted to get into startup when you were already doing stuff with Microsoft with an established company.
Yeah, no, great question. Certainly a lot of stability at Microsoft, and I started my job at Microsoft right after college, so it was all I really knew at that time. I always had an itch, so I was kind of moving around within Microsoft at a lot of smaller teams that kind of felt like startups, where our VPs were like VCs. They would fund projects and we'd go out and deliver them. And so I felt kind of like an entrepreneur when I was at Microsoft. But really, so that was always in the back of my mind. I always like a big challenge. I want to create a large impact on the world, and you can certainly do that at Microsoft as well. But what I eventually happened is after, my son was born, I was kind of sitting around on paternity leave, eating a bunch of ice cream, just like thinking about with a baby on my lap, just kind of thinking about, the impact I want to make in the world. And I felt at Microsoft, I could make a really large scale impact, but on a small piece of the product. So in a small piece of the product I was touching might go out to millions of people, but it's still a small piece of the product. But then in the startup world, I could make, maybe I'm not engaging with millions of users right away, but I'm doing it across, all of the things it takes to build a product and marketing and sales. And so having that kind of holistic experience was really interesting to me. And yeah, totally. I mean, a lot of people thought I was crazy right after starting a family. Why didn't you go do this when you had no kids and you're single? But I did the proper planning to make it so that it worked out and had the support around me, so I was able to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and I think it's great because when people ask that question, I mean, the first thing I think of is you have life experience now to help you with your startup that you would not have had before you had your family and your kids. Yeah, or your kid. You have one.
Oh, actually, you have two now. Yeah.
Okay, so your kids. So I was okay saying kids before. So yeah, no, I mean, I'm part of the reason I have the show is I am so passionate about entrepreneurs and being an entrepreneur. We're a unique personality type, and I don't think there's ever a wrong time in anyone's life to want to change and inspire the world with your thoughts and ideas. So I think it's awesome that you did it, and I think it actually makes me more excited to learn about Humanly and what made you kind of see the need to create the value. So why don't you explain how you guys would help a high volume hiring organization streamline?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start with kind of a personal story. So I was a high volume hire or candidate myself. So after I graduated from the University of Washington here in Seattle, I had a technical degree, and it was a hot time for technology. So we had a lot of companies that would come to campus and interview us. I had a colleague of mine that was also going through the same interviews as me, and it was just really interesting because we would the process just seemed really disjointed. Oftentimes we would never hear back. Someone wouldn't show up to the interview. Her and I would do the exact same interviews with the exact same panel. We had the same degree, same background, but they'd ask her like these 10 questions and me like these 10 questions. So it felt really disjointed, almost like unfair. It felt that, hey, we weren't hearing back when we're emailing these recruiters. And as I joined Microsoft and got into HR tech, I realized it wasn't because recruiting teams or hiring teams were bad people or they were purposely ignoring us. It wasn't anything like that. It was just that they didn't have the technologies and tools to really engage with all candidates at scale. So really what we're doing at Humanly is we think every candidate deserves an outcome. So if you have a couple thousand people applying, but only a couple jobs that you're filling, how do we get our automation, our chats to talk to everyone right away within 24 hours? And maybe they're not a great fit right away, but let's put them on a silver medalist candidate list so we can touch base with them and say, hey, Joe, we know you weren't a fit last year, but did you get that degree you're working on? So really, we want to help everyone engage with candidates at scale and then screen and schedule the ones that are a good fit for these virtual interviews, which is oftentimes the next step. You hop on a Zoom with a candidate, you hop on a Teams meeting, and then our tools will sit in those virtual meetings, take notes for you, write follow-up emails automatically for you so they're in your draft folder when you're done with the day. But really, how do we automate the parts around getting the right people to the meeting and not having to worry about kind of the manual parts of the meeting so you can really have a conversation like we're having here. So that's kind of the genesis there.
Yeah. So, I only have 150 to 200 employees at any given time, so I'm not a high volume employer. But, as I hear you speak on this, I'm like thinking, man, I should figure out how I can use it, or if there's companies that do it smaller level, because I always feel like every person, you brought up a good point about how different questions get asked by different people. And I think that the reality is a lot of times people are doing interviews that have never been coached or taught how to interview in the first place. When you look at, like in my industry, most of my directors or upper level management kind of got promoted within and then took that role. So then they're really not educated in asking fair, unbiased questions, right? So the first thing is I'm learning about this. I think it's actually amazing that you guys do that. So how do you put together, like how do you guys hire, or how did you figure out how to just kind of streamline? And it sounds to me like you're bringing A-level candidates in front of the employer, because pre-screening, right?
Yeah. Really, the goal is, instead of going through 4,000 resumes, and also candidates are disadvantaged there because they're not getting there. Even the good ones have to wait a week to talk to a human, so they're not getting their questions answered. So answering their questions in an automated fashion is part of the screening. But yes, instead of going through that whole process, you're now kind of sitting back where your calendar is filled with candidates that are a good fit. And yeah, you bring up a good point. I think, there's a lot of companies that might not have a high volume of roles, but they might have specific roles that are getting high volume in. And particularly B2C companies, if you're not treating candidates right, you're losing money. Virgin Media did a study saying they lose like $6 million because candidates that are ignored or have a bad experience will go to a competitor. The average we were talking about Florida earlier. The average Disney job candidate spends 8 times as much money at Disney parks as the average consumer. So if you get like 4,000 people applying to a job, those are not just candidates, but they're your customers and their future customers and their advocates for your brand. So try and talk to all of them, use automation to answer their questions, to engage with them, and then, spend your human time on the ones that are a good fit.
And what is the smallest size, like hiring company you guys will work with?
So we're definitely kind of, good question. We're generally selling to larger, and that's obviously because they have more roles that are high volume, so the pain's deeper. But yeah, we have in the past certainly worked with companies around 100, 200 that have maybe they have a handful of roles that are coming in with lots and lots of resumes. So we have lighter ways of using the tool. We actually have some stuff. It's actually good timing coming out next month that anyone can pick up and invite to like a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting or a Google Meet meeting. It'll take your notes from the interview. It can put them into your ATS, and it will also write like follow-up emails that you can review and then send out to the candidates. So that's something that's easier for anyone to pick up versus having to have a ton of volume.
Actually, I'll be able to give me a demo or a demo on it. That actually sounds pretty cool. So, okay, so now I know we're kind of the original idea that started, right? It was the mismatched questions for each candidate. But then as you started to grow this, so to take me from the birth of the original idea through the progression, right, of where you are today.
Yeah, so our journey started. So in 2019, I was working at a company called Tiny Pulse, an employee engagement company, and I had a really supportive CEO when he interviewed me when I started, and I told him, "Hey, I'm going to work my butt off for you for 3 years, but then I do want to start my own company." And he was, so when that time came 3 years later, so that was in 2019 when that time came. So I had a family, was a single source of income, now had 2 kids. So I made my first transition to go from stability to less stability with 1 kid. Now I'm going to even less stability. So I talked to my CEO and I said, "Hey, it's been 3 years. I want to do this the right way, the transition, but can I move into a part-time role while I'm kind of at least getting some things going on and it was a very non-competitive company I was building. So he gave me that ability, and I started fundraising while I was actually getting enough fundraising so that I couldn't afford to bootstrap it, but enough money so that I could pay myself. So yeah, we started there, and then we were trying to put the product at that time in 2019, early 2020. We're biting off much more than we could chew. We wanted to solve for all of talent management, all of the employee life cycle, offboarding employees, using our technology to help automate the kind of repetitive conversations throughout kind of pre-hire to retire. And that was just too much. Investors knew that. So we kind of reeled it in and said, let's get really focused. Let's start by just doing candidate screening. Then we added scheduling. Then we added the parts around kind of the video interview. So it was a process, certainly. And one that I wouldn't write any code until we interviewed a ton of customers, got a lot of data. So really at the end of the day, it was the customers and people we interviewed that drove us in the direction we moved. And eventually started raising some money and going deeper. But really we found time savings is really just a big pain point for high volume hiring. So how do you automate those manual pieces?
And how do you identify the value? Like, so I just wonder, and hopefully you'll appreciate this as a good question. So you can, it's like so many, and maybe this with you working with high volume businesses, like this is what makes it easier for you. So many businesses, like, since they don't have the employee to make the money on yet, it's hard for them to assign a value to the hiring process, right? So how did you guys come up with that value proposition and how to actually make your price model?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a couple of things real quick. So I think one thing we did so at being in product management for a while, I think the old school way of doing things is, hey, do a little bit of research, write up a ton of requirements, and then 6 months later, a product comes out and you find out if people like it or not. And then things move to more iterative and you're getting feedback as you go. But for us, like we needed more to really answer that question. We needed more than just people saying they wanted what we were building. We wanted to actually see if they'd be willing to pay for it and what parts they'd be willing to pay for it. So we actually started by white labeling third parties. So we found a third party tool that gave us permission to white label kind of some elements of what they were doing. And that way it wasn't exactly what we wanted to build. We ended up building something quite a bit different, but it allowed us to test like what people will pay for and what they won't actually pay for. So that was having a product before you built a product is kind of the best way of testing. And the company we're white labeling from won because we were basically going out and selling their product for them. And it helped. And then we also did a lot of manual things where we were recruiters on behalf of our customers. So we were humans actually going in and doing the job that we said we were going to automate. So they didn't have the staff or the human, but we said, hey, here's Sarah on our team, pay her this small amount. And we're at that point taking a loss on it. And she'll be your recruiter. We're eventually going to be building a product that will replace Sarah. And that was, I guess, a friendlier in because it was a human. It was an easier sell, but then they could actually get a very cheap, low cost individual to come in and help. And then we said, okay, now we're going to replace this with it. Now that we've gained your trust, we're going to bring in the tech side. So that was one of the strategy we used when people were uncomfortable at first. We gave them something we knew they were already comfortable with, and that's a human recruiting coordinator. And then we said, let's promote people like Sarah to do more of your higher skilled jobs and the deeper like salary negotiations, and let our technology handle the other things Sarah was doing. So that's one of the things we do.
See, I love that you just said that, because that's one of the things that I'm always trying to explain to people with automation. So many people see automation and would instantly probably be like, oh, okay, so you hired this girl, Prem, but then she's going to end up getting replaced by the AI. So how do you keep her? But then you actually answered the question I was going to ask you, which is she can move up, she can do higher level things while our AI does the entry level, right?
Yeah.
And the AI gives consistency. It's right. So you want to talk about, so like,
Yeah.
let me back. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And Sarah's actually a real person that had moved to now a senior recruiter, and then she moved to people operations. So it's been a great way of kind of providing that platform. But yeah, no, and as far as the consistency and fairness, so, in the old way, so I'll take one of our customers, they do university recruiting, and they'll get about 4,000 candidates that apply in a 2-month period. They just had the humans to look at about 20% of the candidates. So they're like quickly going through resumes. So you already have 80% of folks that are pretty much ignored. And then the 20% that do get that human look are waiting 2 to 3 weeks for a human interview. So it's not really comparing automation against human. It's would you rather have this automation that can help or not hear anything back, right? So I think there's that piece of it that has been helpful. On the consistency and fairness thing too, because these chats are automated, we're able to guarantee we're asking the same set of questions. We're able to take out language that is maybe not, like there's some words that if it was if someone had English as a second language, they might not pick up on this phrasing in the same way as this phrasing, or if they're from the UK or so we can make the language very inclusive to all. We can even make the way we're delivering it. So if you're sight impaired, and sadly, there's been some companies that have been sued because how they've treated people where there's some tools that will look at, hey, are you making eye contact in an interview? And if you're not, you're less confident, which is not a great thing to do. But what we do with our chats is if you're sight impaired, our screen readers can read our questions to you. And it's more than just the legal requirement around accessibility. We really do make an effort to give you options so that you get a level playing field in that regard. So there's the language, and then there's also the questions we ask. So we can, you might have someone I'm talking to that doesn't agree with me if I tell them that, hey, for this role, coachability is more important than where they went to school, whether they went to like Harvard or Stanford. But the hiring manager might say, I don't agree with you. I only want people that went to this school. We can actually show them with data because we're also plugged into the candidate outcomes. So which candidates had success at the company. And we can say, hey, this cohort of candidates for this role in this region, the difference between 3 to 5 years of experience and where they went to school doesn't matter much, but what does is how coachable they are or how good their communication skills are. So I think there's that other piece where we're collecting a lot of data so we can show, hey, this is where you should be focused and not on this other stuff.
So that's awesome. So the first thing I want to hit at is when you talk about sometimes it takes 2 to 3 weeks to call a candidate. Do you guys have percentages that you've collected? How many of those candidates actually got hired in other roles or positions that then they missed the opportunity to even hire that candidate in that 2 to 3 week period?
Yeah, it's a great question. So one thing I'll say is it does vary a lot based on role type and industry. So some of our customers are in the hourly space, like a Taco Bell, or you might have a customer in the professional side, like a Microsoft. So it varies a lot, but yes, some industries have very high drop-off rates. So if you're waiting 2 to 3 weeks, especially what we've seen with COVID and a lot of the power given back to the candidates in the hourly space and hospitality, where you're losing over 50% of your candidates if you make them wait, just 3 or 4 days in some cases. And in other cases, you schedule them for an interview and they don't show up, or even don't show up on day one. So shortening that cycle and taking that first screening from, 2 to 3 weeks to 24 hours, it is really important. In some other jobs, it's a little bit less than over 50%, but it still is significant. The other thing too is you'll have candidates come in that it's not just about the company screening the candidate, but the candidate screening the company, where if I get into an interview and then I ask, okay, tell me about your remote work policy. Maybe it wasn't like that clear on the job description or the website. Many candidates don't even really read everything on the website or job description. And they say, oh, okay, that's not going to work for me. I thought I thought you all had a remote work policy. And now that candidate is less qualified. So if you answer their questions, you also know that when you're meeting with them, they know what this is and they're qualifying themselves. So I think that whole getting that first 24 hours in place where you're screening them and they're screening you, getting that done really makes a big impact.
Yeah, well, and I also think, since, you said since COVID and everything, the power has gone back to the candidate, and that's so true right now. But another thing that a lot of people on my show have talked about is culture and, having good cultures. But I think it just the quickness that you can respond to them as a candidate kind of literally sets the table or the stage for them to realize, the company I am trying to get hired on, they're getting that call back so quick, which means when I work with them, I have to be that attentive, the emails, the phone calls, because they gave me that respect on the front end, right? I always look at like the little things that people don't think about, but subconsciously that candidate, if they're comparing other things, right? So
yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, you have an opportunity to like have goodwill with everyone that applies if you do it the right way, right? That's a huge opportunity. Even the ones that aren't getting the job, you're paying in time and money to attract them to your employer brand. So no, 100%. Like one of the things that was most exciting for me is reading. We have candidates rate at the end of each chat with our automation. They'll rate the experience with it. And sometimes we get feedback saying like, hey, I'm really excited about Moss Adams because of how quickly they respond and how tech forward they are. And like, so a lot of candidates respond I think we average like a 4.8 out of 5 in terms of candidate ratings. And that experience is not that they don't know they're talking to humanly, they're talking to the customer. So that is, rapport that the customer is building with those candidates. So no, 100%,
How long did it take? So going back a little bit to this, so you start raising some capital. What was that experience like, being all of a sudden having the idea of, I want to do this myself, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, I got to get money to do it. Explain that experience a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny, I was just telling the story. So when we onboard new employees, I'll take them through the journey and talk about fundraising, and it's definitely, there was a lot of interesting moments. So yeah, I think when we just got started, a lot of investors had similar reactions to kind of what you were alluding to, that some buyers might have around, hey, this is replacing people. Is automation really the right thing to do? Are candidates even going to want to talk to a chat bot? And our interviewers going to want things in their meetings? They're taking notes for them, so there's a lot of initial feedback there. But then I think what really got investors moving is when we went out and actually got real customers trying it out, using it, giving us feedback and saying, okay, this makes total sense. This is stuff that I don't want to be spending time on. Let's let the automation do it. And then let's spend my time on these higher value human to human conversations. So we've always, I think what turned the needle a little bit with investors is, we're even at our name, where we know that recruiting, talent acquisition, HR, always going to be human driven. But how do you help that human be more effective on the investment side? So yeah, 2020 is, we were going through the Y Combinator Accelerator, and we were planning on fundraising afterwards. And there's a big demo day and there's a lot of excitement, but I was flying down to San Francisco once a week to be part of this, or the Bay Area. And then COVID hit. So there was tons of uncertainty. So we're basically raising our first round of money when lots of companies are doing layoffs. everyone's just not sure what this means. There was, the cases in Kirkland, Washington, where I'm from, where some of the initial cases were, and then it's spreading across the U.S. and at this point it had been in the States for a little bit, but yeah, that was a very hard time. I was doing about right after we got through Y Combinator, there was a 2-week period where I think I had 7 or 8 investor calls a day. So meeting with a lot of investors, all virtual. So that was new to them. It was new to me. I could do a lot more meetings because it's virtual. I'm not, driving around or flying around, but everyone is just kind of in this wait and see mode. So raising that first round to us is once we started getting those first people signing up and paying us and saying, this is solving a real problem for me. And getting that first investor in, then it was very much more downhill from there. And then the next round we raised was right as the economic crisis was starting to hit. So we've definitely, and again, raising that next round of about 4 million was, again, very much, it's not so much about my ability to convince an investor. It's about my ability to share that these customers are saying they want to sign up for this thing. So that's what really helped me instead of just trying to, have basically letting the customer speak for themselves is what really helped us.
I can tell you for me, because people keep telling me I need to start to raise capital, and the thing that's hard for me, and so I'm going to start with this and then you can piece in and add however you want. But, it's like in some cap raises, it's like people, the investors want equity. Some are okay without equity as long as you can guarantee you'll pay them back in a certain long time. And for me, I've always been able to kind of bootstrap it, not take any investment, So, how uncomfortable as another CEO does that make you feel? Because I can tell you, like, that's what's been slowing me down with raising capital is I'm uncomfortable right now to do both, So
yeah, well, you're in a good situation for sure. I mean, a lot of investors would tell me don't raise money until you have to, right? Other people have different thoughts. It really depends on, I would say the founder's end game. Don't do stuff just because you read about it. Or I mentor a lot of more junior entrepreneurs, and I think it sometimes seems like just the thing to do if you have a tech company that, okay, we're going to raise a seed round, then we're going to raise an A, then a B, then a C. That's certainly what we're doing, but it isn't there's no right or wrong. So, and there's a lot, particularly with what's kind of happening right now in the capital markets. I think there's a lot of different alternative funding sources. So, there's grants you can get, especially in Canada has some great ones if you have any listeners out there, but the US does as well. I think, make sure if you do the traditional venture capital route, that is it's like a certain path and rails that you're signing up for, which is fine to do, but just know what you're signing up for there, because that's where the outsized growth expectations happen, where your chances of failure when you're trying to get to, 10 million ARR, then 50, then 100, chances of failure are higher. So, depending on what you're looking for as a founder, it might be better not to raise, or to raise not to raise via these traditional manners. And maybe, like you were saying, take a loan or take non-dilutive capital. But, I would make sure you are clear about your end game as an entrepreneur and where you want to take this thing. If, for instance, you want to sell your company in a year or 2 years, probably don't go to raise a ton of money right now. Try and bootstrap it. So those are kind of lots of different things happening right now.
Yeah. Well, that's good, a little off path from asking questions about your company, but it's good value for the people listening because, I think there's not a lot of shows that talk about that. And it's such a unique experience, individual to individual, business to business, on what kind of where you think you're go and what that growth rate can actually be. With you, I think you're in a good place because you're using AI. So once you kind of get the ball rolling, I think it can scale very quickly versus my situation. There's a lot of operational things that are needed. We're still using people to put in robots and monitor robots. The AI component really hasn't been built out in that. So, it's going to obviously be slower because you have to kind of plug in those key markets. But anyhow, so So then so you've got people kind of buying in now, right? Um, how did you start to figure out the value and then your go-to-market strategy? Like for instance, is it is it like per candidate how you guys bill people, or is it just like a subscription where they say to you, I think we're going to interview 4,000 people a year, this is how much money we're going to pay? You want to go into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's two things we thought about. We first thought about like how are people used to paying for this stuff, and I think the closer we can get to that, the less complex it is. But then the other piece are what are our other kind of goals here. And one big goal, you mentioned AI, one big part of AI is having as much data as we can. And this isn't people's personal data, but can we have aggregate anonymized data that says, hey, these are the questions that work best for this role, or by answering candidates' questions up front in our chat versus asking them questions right out of the gate, does that give us a higher conversion rate? So there's a lot of data we wanted to collect. And the reason I say that is when we did pricing, we didn't want to disincentivize our buyers from using us for as many candidates as possible. So we knew right out of the gate, we didn't want to charge you per candidate. We want you to have our tool talk to all your candidates, and that's how our system learns and gets better. And then we also knew they were used to paying for entry-level recruiting coordinators, which, I know some amazing recruiting coordinators. It's a great role, and our goal isn't to, certainly not to replace humans, but to replace some of what recruiting coordinators are doing so that they can be more efficient and effective. So we looked at how much companies are paying for humans, recruiting coordinators, to do some of these tasks like screening, like scheduling, like note-taking, follow-up emails. And there's about 14,000 companies in the US that are about 1,000 and above employees and have high volume problems. And they're paying about $6.6 billion on recruiting coordinators doing these tasks. And every recruiting coordinator that I've interviewed has aspirations to be a recruiter or to be a senior recruiter. So what we've done with our companies is we've priced based on, because they're paying those recruiting coordinators like a flat salary, and this is a long-winded answer, but we're basically just paying a flat SaaS subscription, yearly subscription that's, a fraction of what you would pay a recruiting coordinator. And there is a variability based on the amount of roles, just like recruiting coordinators, each one can take 15 roles. But now we're saying you pay that same price, but instead of taking 15 roles, they can do like 100 or 200 because it's our technology.
Glad you actually gave me the long-winded one because they actually gave me a couple more ideas for questions. So out of that 6.6 billion, okay, you said you came in at a fraction of the cost. So I'm going to say, and you can fill in if I'm wrong, but let's say you guys say, okay, well, out of 6.6 billion, we have a $3 billion opportunity, let's just say. Or for easy enough, let's say it's the $1 billion opportunity. What percentage of that opportunity then did you guys set as your goal to capitalize on?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So there's we have like varying levels of like what's this year, then how do we expand? So that number I gave you there's kind of a couple, I'd say 4 stages of our company. One is the number I gave you, which is conversational AI for high volume hiring. We want to then move to mid/high. Then we want to move beyond just recruiting, but can we automate some of these repetitive conversations when you're onboarding, so that those are bigger numbers, but starting with what we're focusing on right now. There's like in this year, very specifically, there's about 6 or 7 markets and types of roles. So support, sales, operations, that are healthcare is another one where it's really high volume. So that the first the segment of that we're going after right away represents like the first couple 100 million of that. This year we're not going to get to a couple 100 million revenue this year, but that's what that's the segment we're targeting. And it's big enough where when things like this economic crisis happens and tech companies are doing layoffs, because we're starting this year with a kind of big enough portion, there's, ways to adjust go to market and not necessarily sell to tech companies, for instance. But we got to have the total addressable market, which is the larger number. We then have more of the serviceable market, the attainable market that we're going after now. And then we have just our go-to-market plan. Who are we literally sending emails to and cold calling this year?
Awesome. Yeah, and thanks for walking us through that because, I always, it's always funny because people always have, if you're going to have the dream and you have the vision, you have to be able to make the plan. And the easiest way to make that plan is figure out what market you're going to try to address, what that market, the value of that market as it currently exists, and how your idea is going to come in and disrupt it, and how much you can capitalize. So that was good to know. And like I said, it's just good for me to be able to teach people listening to the show, like kind of how you do it. So kind of jumping around a little bit to get to the learning or the AI part of it. So I don't know, with the strides and how much is happening in that field right now with machine learning, how did you guys even get started in that? Okay. So like going back to your background, and what you did, like it's a question of mine. I always wonder, like, how do you start to get that inputted? What system you even start to input it into? Are there like, I don't want to say white label, but are there systems that you have to design? Did you have to design the system from the beginning? And sorry, that's a long-winded question, but did you have to design it from the beginning yourself, or were you able to plug into something that already exists for your idea?
Yeah, good question. I think the first thing we found is that we don't want a lot of players that kind of went into the space early and were like AI for recruiting. Some of them we felt, and some of these are friends of mine, and I know them very well, like how they kind of built their products. People were at the beginning almost like throwing technology at a human-driven problem and kind of forcing AI when really could be some basic automation or some kind of rules-based logic that will say, hey, this candidate should go here because of this reason, versus some complex algorithm that's deciding it. So I think the first step is really understanding what our customers truly need, and what they don't need. And I think what was really important for us is, to answer your question, is not just what we built, but what we didn't build, because we saw a bunch of infrastructure around AI that we felt would eventually be commoditized. And now we're seeing this. You couldn't have predicted some of this would happen so fast with OpenAI and ChatGPT, but certainly felt that the mechanics around building some of this AI would become a lot easier to do later. So we didn't want to build that whole infrastructure. Kind of like if you're building a cloud company before AWS and you're saying, okay, I'm going to build the whole cloud and then I'm going to build my app on top of it, that would be a lot of work. So we wanted to focus on so the starting point for us was starting with very basic things. Rules-based system that says, if the candidate answers yes to this question, put them down this path. So you can kind of think of it like a decision tree. If they answer no, put them down this path. Much more basic, and we could even white label third parties to have that build get in front of customers. What that's not going to be able to do is handle complex FAQs. If the candidate says, hey, I'm in Colorado and and I have this question about pay, AI might be able to know, hey, there's certain pay transparency laws in Colorado. You should answer it like this and generate a response. It could also do a good job of matching intent. So if I'm typing a bunch of stuff, it'll know, hey, this is what Joe means and this is how I can respond. But we didn't need that right away. And people were on their mobile phones too. That a lot of our candidates, they're not wanting to like type out a bunch of stuff and get this amazing generated answer. They're cool with pressing buttons that say, I can start on this date, I'm doing this. And so I think starting simple and not just feeling like we had to put AI just because it was cool or hot was good. And now over time, we found some very valuable ways. And now how we do it is, you take a bunch of data and you can take models like GPT-3 or ChatGPT, which we incorporate as well as Azure and some other things. But now you can actually build like FAQ scenarios that are much more complex, or generating follow-up emails. So some of the stuff that was beyond the basic, but that's kind of how we started with the basics and what really moved the needle for customers.
Yeah, awesome. So we've been talking a lot about this part, and I didn't leave any time open for family and stuff. So I want to hop into that a touch. So, because it's just part of what the show is. So you said you have 2 kids now, boys, girls?
Yeah. So I have a 7-year-old. Actually, he's very soon to be April 13th. So that's coming up. And then I have a 4-year-old girl. So 7-year-old boy and 4-year-old girl. Yeah.
So any more apples in your eye? You got any visions to have more kids, or are you good with 2 for now?
Well, we got a golden doodle puppy, so that's probably good enough for number 3. So we're probably just got the dog, and the dog's been keeping me up at night, and my wife up at night more so than the kids, but right now at least. But yeah, I think we're pretty good here. We'll see what the future holds, but for right now, we're probably going to stand pat.
It'd be cool if your wife was on right now to see how she answered that question in parallel to your answer. So. How did you meet your wife? Obviously, you're married, so
yeah,
go into that.
Yeah. So we met at so it was actually kind of interesting. So I had a friend of mine visiting from Germany. I lived in the city here in Seattle, and he was my exchange student in high school. And he was visiting Seattle, so I hadn't seen him. This was like when I was like 24 or so. So 6 years after high school, he came and visited Seattle. So we got invited to a party at our neighbor's house, and my wife-to-be was one of the people hosting the party. So we got into the elevator, and she was in the elevator, and it was an old building. So the elevator gets stuck. It ended up actually stuck for about an hour and a half. And it was just very awkward at first. The fire department had to eventually get us out. But through that time, we got to know each other a bit. It was definitely just a weird experience. So it gave us a shared experience. And at the time, she was dating someone, so we were just friends. But a couple years later, I saw she was single again and passed her on a date. So the rest is history.
Persistence paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Facebook helped me with keeping tabs. I'm just kidding.
That's awesome. So how long you guys are married now then?
Yeah, so we've been married for about 8 years. Yeah.
Yeah. So why does she do that?
I should spit that out much quicker. Sorry, I had to think about.
So we can make Chris, could you edit that a little, speed it up a little so it doesn't look like there was such a pause,
Yeah. Appreciate it. Yeah.
So what does she do then?
Yeah, so she studied psychology. Now she's home with the kids right now, and I think she's gonna do that until my daughter's at least until she's in school. So this is she's kind of always wanted to be at home with the kids, and we're making it happen. So
fantastic, good for you guys. So is Washington, is that where you've always wanted to live, or is it just kind of where you ended up?
Yeah, so I was born so my parents are from India. I was born in Kansas, actually, in Wichita, but I moved out of there when I was 3. So my dad got a job at Boeing. He's an engineer. So we came out to Seattle, and so I've been here since 89 or so.
So is he still at Boeing then, or is he still here?
Yeah, he retired. So he was there for like 30 years, but he retired. So his like entrepreneurial experience was like leaving his country and going to a new country. That was like his thing. And then once he came here, stability was really important. So he stayed in job for his career, stayed in the same job. But yeah, he's retired now, enjoying retirement. He's taking he's doing some photography and writing. He's writing a little memoir about some parts of his life just for our family, for fun. So that's been cool to read.
Fantastic. So is your mom still around too then?
No, so she passed a little while back, but yeah,
okay.
It's still certainly the big part of my life in my mind and a big motivation for me. So.
Well, I'm sorry for your loss. So do you think you're more like your mom or your dad, or your perfect combination in between?
People say I look a lot like my dad. My brother has a little more the features of my mom physically. But I think there's a little of both. I think a lot of my entrepreneurial stuff comes more from my mom and kind of her passion and tenacity and those sort of things.
So what did your mom do then when she was still with us?
Yeah, so she wasn't actually an entrepreneur per se. So she was a psychologist. So she had worked with kids with behavioral disorders and learning disabilities. So she got her master's in psychology. But the reason that for the entrepreneurial thing is she's always, always, whether within the constructs of an existing organization, she was always like pushing the envelope, always trying to push people to do more, to be better. She always valued empowering people and some of those sort of things that work well when you're managing a startup. And then she always, was one she always said, just, if you're going to do something, finish it, but also just start. Sometimes the hardest thing is just starting. And I think when I was at Microsoft for 10 years and wanting to be an entrepreneur, I had some blocks around just starting the entrepreneurial thing. And I finally did it.
What a cool and crazy parallel that your mom was in psychology and that's your wife does,
Yeah.
So I mean, there's all sorts of studies probably, and I'm not a psychologist and I don't do this stuff, but that people end up like being with people that they were around as their parents, and they just don't realize it in the moment. But
there's certainly a lot of examples of that for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. So the what do you like to do for fun when you're not doing the entrepreneurial thing?
Yeah, I'm a big joining podcasts is pretty fun.
I'm really glad you came on this one, by the way, because I've been having a blast. But
no, absolutely no. I'm a big Seattle sports fan, so Mariner fan, Seahawks fan, University of Washington Husky fan. So I don't get out to as many games as I once did, but excited for baseball season to start. I'm now that my son is old enough and my daughter soon will be. She plays a little soccer, but my son's playing basketball now, so I'm starting to get into that. Take him out, and she'll be joining soon enough as well. So that's that I'll probably get back into playing a little bit, which I hadn't done as much of. Mostly just watching on the couch right now.
Yeah, my daughter played volleyball. So I have a daughter myself, and then 3 stepsons. But it's kind of like the best time of my life, So my kids they all work in the company now, which is actually awesome. Well, except for my youngest stepson because he's still in school, but all the other 3 are active in the company. So it's really awesome for me because I was able to experience like the sports life, and my daughter was on the junior Olympic team for volleyball. So we traveled around the country. So it was she played at a high level, and but now we work together every day, which makes work for me like a family party. Every day.
Yeah, that's nice. I've thought about that a little bit. As I, who knows what I'll be doing as they graduate from college and all that. But I probably will be still doing something in the entrepreneurial world. It would be pretty fun to, even when they're in high school and stuff, to be working with them. So.
Yeah, I've always said it's really easy. I found a lot of people are like, "Oh man, how do you work?" Because my landscape company, I have with my younger brother John, and I've got 2 cousins that work with me at the companies, and people are always like, "Oh, I don't know how you work with family," but I've always been in a unique position. Like all of the family that's not my kids that work with me, they're like younger brother, younger cousins. So I've always been like the big brother or older cousin. So I was always kind of in like a mentor mode.
Yep.
Ways, And then with my kids, it just extends as parents, that's really what we are, right? Good parents are just great mentors,
Yeah.
So,
yeah, totally.
So it's been really easy for me to just continue to be a great mentor to my kids and let them grow in their professional life with me. So it's been like a real blessing for me. It's what actually inspires me the most to continue my entrepreneurial journey, because I can grow with the kids,
Yeah, no, 100%. A lot of my management style is similar to my fatherhood style in terms of, mentoring, empowering, sometimes letting them fail versus trying to be all over them. And yeah, no, for sure. That's something I hope to do one day as well. And then, I think one thing that's extremely important in any business partner or employee or manager is trust. And, oftentimes not with all family members, but many times, that trust is built in. So that helps a lot.
Yeah. Well, I've always felt like as an entrepreneur, like if I treat the people that are working with me every day, whether it's my family or not, if I treat them all like extended family in the way I want my family to treat me, I treat them the same way, we're going to accomplish awesome things together. because we should all respect each other and respect each other's ideas, because that's how thoughts grow and businesses grow. It's like 150 people contributing to one common goal is going to move the ball way faster than one person. So, so where do you see humanly going? What do you see the growth for? How like like where are you at now, and in 5 years, where do you think it's going to be?
Yeah, for sure. So it's a really exciting time for us, and part of the reason for the excitement is, some of it's luck, some of it's planned, but I feel like the timing is right now for AI in recruiting, AI and talent acquisition and in HR in general. Maybe 5 years ago, people weren't necessarily ready, and part of that was because the technology wasn't ready and in kind of the state it's in. There still are a lot of, you have to be very careful, and there's ways AI can cause more bias or be problematic. So I think it puts us in a good position, because it's hard for companies to build this stuff in-house and do it in the right way, in a safe way that's ethical, that's compliant, that's not going to break rules around how you talk to a candidate and get you in trouble. So it puts us in a position where we built a lot of data and expertise in our product, where we can deliver you kind of the latest and greatest on the AI side, but in a way that you can rest assured is going to be done up to par, not just from a legal standpoint, but also from an ethical standpoint. We will treat candidates fairly. And so it gives us a big opportunity. So really, we're definitely expecting, we had a really good growth year last year. I think the number I'm most proud of, other than revenue growth and whatnot, is our net revenue retention. So customers of us that stayed with us. So we grew, and we had about 149% net revenue retention. Usually about 105% is good, but that's people that wanted to expand with us, even through a tough market. So that was something I was proud of in 2022, when people were cutting costs. Many of our customers actually grew. I think in this year ahead, we want to be, in this kind of conversational AI space. So anytime you're having a two-way conversation with a job candidate, whether that's through a chatbot or SMS or a human, we want to be there, making it more efficient and equitable. So this year, it's going to be nailing kind of that segment of the market, those 14,000 high volume hiring companies in the US. Obviously not going to win all of them this year, but that's what we're going after. But as we go forward, that we want to kind of evolve the technology, but also go a little bit further downstream. So we do some stuff now around the onboard piece, but around employee engagement. But can we still use these automated chat conversations to follow you through kind of your journey as an employee? So that's so at the end of the day, we want to be the biggest company in the world focused on AI for HR, and particularly automating those repetitive conversations and helping humans be better at the ones that are not automated.
Are you already worldwide, or are you just in the United States looking to expand worldwide? Because you just said you want to be the largest company worldwide. So
yeah, eventually, and that's more of the 5, 7, 10-year plan. But right now we are. So we are mainly in the US, but we have a Canada and the UK, other parts of the EU as well. And then I think we have a couple in South America, but probably 90% is in the US right now.
So when you expand, I mean, the one question I have, it's like with all the language stuff. So like, how do you figure out all the different languages, and how do you plug that in to the learning model? Is that easier than it probably sounds like to a guy like me, or is it complex?
No, it can be complex. So, and when I was earlier, when I was referring to kind of some of the early companies that were kind of throwing tech at a human problem, some of the early kind of chatbots for recruiting, they really struggled when they started needing to incorporate different languages and different nuances of different languages. And it's one thing to like go on Google Translate and get a translation, but having it actually use like the recruiting and HR terms that are common might be different than just the basic language skills. So I will say some of the technology that's emerged, like ChatGPT 3 or what Azure or Google are doing, has made it easier to get like a baseline translation. But the way we work is we want it to not just be translated so you can understand it, but to actually be an effective conversation with the right nuances. So we actually will have our language models and language that we're using audited by a third party that has actual native speakers in these different locations that are actually coming from an HR or recruiting background. So they might say, hey, this is how you refer to this part of a resume here. So yeah, that's like, for example, might say like, hey, give me your document if it was translated badly instead of give me your resume. So that's the nuance in other languages that we need. So it has, short answer, it has become a lot easier to get something that makes sense in other languages, but we're trying to take it a step further. So we won't launch to a new country or language until we have that comfort level via the third party that's doing that for us.
Just in your explanation made me kind of think, because like, so one of the industries I'm in is snow removal, and snow removal contractors. I mean, that's a $25 billion industry. And we're constantly, unfortunately, we use so many seasonal people. So we're constantly hiring in the winter, and then we lose those people, and then you have to re-onboard people. So as we've been talking on the show, I'm like, yeah, I've been thinking like, man, I should see if Pam could help me out in that, right? But then I think about it, you probably would need to have like specialists working with you to explain what we'd be looking for in that candidate in the first place to be able to start to streamline them. Is that kind of how it works?
Yeah, so it's we've gotten a pretty streamlined kind of scalable onboarding process. So we basically give you a questionnaire that doesn't take a whole lot of time to fill out that can help us. And then if we already have customers, like if we're going to a customer that the roles are similar to other roles we've already serviced, we'll have like an out of the box template for our chats. And then we'll do a little onboarding. But yeah, no, I'd love to talk about that for sure. We, one thing that is interesting for us is we do a little seasonal, but we also do there is a little bit of a parallel to university recruiting where, you might be talking to this candidate, but they haven't quite finished their degree yet. So you got to put them on a cadence where they'll get an email next university season basically happens 2 times a year. So we do a lot of this is like keeping in touch with people to make sure all their information is updated. So we'll get a mail saying, hey, Joe, you applied 3 months ago. You didn't have your visa or sponsorship to work here. Do you have that now? And then if it does, then the manager gets a message saying, hey, so yeah, there is a bit of information we take in because we don't want it to be generic. But we also have a lot of templates around questions and things like that.
We do need to talk again when the show is over, just got the time, because I've got some ideas. I mean, for our industry, and one of the reasons I'm so passionate about having this podcast is to just help the industries that are following the show as it is. And, every snow contractor I ever talked to, and my brother and I included, the thing that keeps us from growing almost exponentially, because there's more work out there than there is people to provide it, is getting qualified people on quick enough and then keeping those people engaged. Because there's a high turnover rate in our industry, so I could think a candidate's perfectly qualified, and then they get a job with Amazon driving one of their trucks, but I need somebody again, one snow event in, I need somebody,
Yeah, 100%. Like some of our candidates with Taco Bell or like Krispy Kreme, like we're getting them scheduled like the day, like they're starting the job like the next day. Like they walk by a Taco Bell, they scan a QR code and go through our screening questions on their phone, and then we're scheduling them. So yeah, no, certainly I think the speed and, the seasonal is a market that we're not like deeply penetrated in. So definitely happy to, maybe we can try some things out that are low cost for you as well. And if it works, then we both win. So
I think we could. I mean, even down to like, so, to have the ability to have bilingual screening, right? Because a lot of our applicants speak Spanish, the rest are English, and so to be able to do that and then make the recruiting seem, totally fair and unbiased. And then, yeah, like you said, to be able to get somebody like in the moment, last minute, oh man, it's going to snow tomorrow. Because, in our industry, I'm buying $2 to $3 million or $200,000 to $300,000 front end loaders. And if somebody's not sitting in it, that's just a burden for me.
Yeah, My first job, so I was a courtesy clerk in Albertsons grocery store. So I was bagging groceries, and there was one like the seasonal times where things just got crazy, particularly during the summer. We're giving out like free ice, and people like it was just crazy. And so there was one day that I was not supposed to work. I think it might have been the 4th of July or something like that. But I was at home and I was sleeping, and the manager calls and they're panicking because they need like everyone that's they're calling like past employees. And so my mom basically just says, my son's asleep, but my other son who doesn't have a job will be there in 5 minutes. And then she hangs up and tells my brother, hey, you have a job now. Go to Albertsons. You need to take your brother's shirt and they'll train you in a couple hours because they need. But yeah, I mean, it is pretty crazy just the speed at which and having, you're right, one of them, you're losing money if you have a seat unfilled. So yeah.
Yeah. So, well, I want to be fair to time, and we're a little over an hour here. So, I always ask at the end of the show, first, is there anything I've left out of my questions that you want to make sure the audience knows about Humanly that maybe I left out through just the kind of free-flowing conversation today?
No, I think we covered everything I would have wanted to, so I appreciate that.
Awesome. So now since you are, you finally made the jump, you became the entrepreneur. You took some of your mom's advice on just getting started, and I applaud you for actually doing it. What do you want at the end of the day? What do you want your entrepreneurial legacy to be?
Yeah, so I think a lot of that has to do with my kids. So I think I want them, whether it's being an entrepreneur or not, I want them to find that job of their dreams, and that vocation that maps to what their passion is. So I want them to kind of, and when I say my kids, I can also extend that to other folks that might be looking at me in that regard. But I want people to know that, hey, you can go out and do what you want to do and create the job that you want if it's not readily available or get handed to you. And that could mean a lot of things. But that's kind of what I want. And then I want to carry on some of my mom's message about just getting out there and getting started. Sometimes that's the hardest part of any journey, just strapping on your boots and getting started. So anything can happen after the starting point. So
awesome. Yeah, and I think, like I said, it's very inspiring, your story. I think it's really cool what you're doing. I think you're going to help a lot of people in the industry. And I think this is one of those situations where with AI, you don't have to worry about if it's going to take jobs, because I actually think it's going to help people get hired. It's going to help people get hired fairly. It'll probably help any inequities in hiring, whether it be men versus women or minorities versus non-minority. So I think you've come up with a great, fair, unbiased solution to get people onboarded as quick as possible, and I think it's a great value to what you're doing. That's my opinion, and I really appreciate you being on the show. I know you're going to add value to automating success also, so I appreciate that.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Yeah, I really enjoyed being on the show and chatting with you, Joe.